Well, the new fiscal year for states and cities kicks off today, but it doesn't look like the budget problems for many of them is getting any better. Overall, they are some $62 billion in the hole. Still, my next guest says he's not worried about state defaults. He's Matt Fabian. He's been analyzing municipal debt for over 15 years. Matt, good to have you back on the program. And you know, I've heard these states, some of them, we're talking about California, Illinois, being called mini Greases. And you disagree with that?
Well, you know, I mean, once again, it's looking at how states structure their debt. States don't have to roll over a lot of debt in a single year. All of the debt is long term. It pays down every year like you do your mortgage. So they don't need market access to stay out of default. So it's a very different situation than.
But you do hear, right? And Matt, I know you've heard this as well. A lot of people are talking about defaults. A lot of people are talking about these unfunded pension liabilities. Then if that is such a if what you're saying is that it's not a concern, then why do we keep hearing these Armageddon-like comments?
Well, you know, I mean, there's very smart people who understand other markets and how other markets work, but they don't necessarily understand munis. Take the example of pensions, right? In the corporate world, a corporation has to fund up an unfunded pension over 6 years. In a muni land, there's really no requirement. So those unfunded pension liabilities are so large because they're largely voluntary that the states fund them in the first place. So it just doesn't have the same kind of financial pressure that would drive them to default, like with corporate America.
Okay, but short of a default, we're seeing some pretty big problems in some major states like Illinois and California. Yeah. How did Illinois get so bad?
Well, I mean, all of those issues are undeniable. The big issue throughout the whole recession has been the states have a real inability to adequately project revenues. So they've been continually underperforming their revenue projections. I mean, it could be that there's just too much optimism at the state level, or you know, the optimistic projections help them not raise taxes and not cut spending in the budget. What it's done is that it forced a lot of the budget decisions into sort of mid-year corrections, and that maybe isn't a good thing for long-term policy.
Then who's who's doing that? Who's going to have the biggest problem? Is it California?
I mean, it's everyone that you know: California, Illinois, you know, New York. You know, these same states are facing, you know, like you said, about a $62 billion budget gap this year. That's down from over $100 billion last year, but it's still a formidable number. And with the federal end of that additional $24 billion of Medicare cash, you know, that's going to make things a little bit worse. Keep the negative headlines rolling, you know, at least for the next 6 months.
So where's the relief? What happens? Where's the relief?
You know, I just think at some point the solutions are going to have to be on the revenue side. There's going to have to be some kind of tax reform, you know, broadening the tax bases, you know, maybe increasing the tax rate a little bit. But you know, spending cuts are just very, very difficult when you look at what states actually do. So in the longer term, it's going to have to come from the revenue side, either from economic growth or through the rates.
Matt, thanks so much. We'll have to leave it there on muni bonds.